society and an economy based on public ownership and democratic planning in order to have the rapid and just transition. The final point I'll make is that the government is patting themselves on the back with what is becoming the kind of national fiver day, that a fiver for those in social welfare, a fiver for those on pensions, a fiver for carers. And I really think the media should not let them away with that. The idea that this is some sort of benefit for people. They're giving people an increase that is less than the rate of inflation. It means in real terms people's incomes are being cut. People are faced with soaring prices across the board, and particularly in terms of energy. And the government is giving them something that won't even keep up with that. That means they'll be driven into further crisis. So the idea that the government should be in any way able to celebrate or present this as a victory for ordinary people, I think is ridiculous.
So this afternoon the government will tweak the system. They'll give some crumbs from the table. The rich will stay rich, the poor will stay poor, and many, many people will freeze in their homes this winter, and some of them will die. The fuel allowance, a €5 increase over 28 weeks is €140. It's estimated to heat a home, this will rise by 700, 800, 900,000 euro next year. So for the winter months, for every euro that the government gives, people will have to pay out at least €3. Right? That's, not the government being generous or anything they should be patted on the back for. There's going to be a 30-cent increase in the minimum wage. That increase will be wiped out, and more than wiped out, by rent increases. Low-paid workers were key workers when it came to taking risks and helping this country through the pandemic. The retail workers, the cleaners, home helps, low-paid workers in nursing homes, etc. There should be a proper COVID bonus and not as a one-off. We say increase the national minimum wage to €15 per week. Free public transport for 19 to 23-year-olds is a half measure. We need emergency measures to deal with an emergency with the climate. That means free public transport for all. That's what we say. And finally, the market has given us a crisis in housing. The market has given us a crisis in energy costs. The market has given us a crisis in childcare and many other things. What we need is a socialist budget which breaks the dictatorship of the market. We're not going to have that today, but we'll continue our campaign for it and take up all the other issues that we've mentioned in the conference so far.
Questions? Okay.
Richard, if I can ask, I suppose we're seeing this very much as or it's been described as very much a transition budget. It's not an emergency budget like last year. It's not a kind of a normal budget as kind of we'd be used to. But do you guys regret the stance that you took in relation to zero COVID, and also the earlier stance in relation to hotel mandatory quarantine? Essentially, you would have locked the country down for longer, and the economic devastation would have been far worse.
No, we precisely pursued or campaigned for that policy in order to limit the damage of lockdowns and get us out of lockdown quicker. We think we ended up with far more economic damage and social damage because the government didn't try and eliminate the virus, and the consequence was we were in essentially a lockdown for 6 months. So our policy was precisely about getting us beyond lockdown. That particular boat has sailed now, but we absolutely think the government mishandled many aspects of the public health crisis, and the real lesson is that insofar as we were able to meet the challenge of COVID, particularly with the vaccination programme, it took unprecedented levels of state intervention to deal with an emergency. Now we are still facing a major emergency in housing, a major emergency in the situation in our hospitals, and a climate and biodiversity crisis. Where are the major state interventions in this budget? Where are the sort of unprecedented responses that you need to that scale of crisis in this budget? They're simply not there. We're back to the old norms of crumbs from the table, while the big agri-polluters, while the big corporations, while the very wealthy get away scot-free. Working class people are going to, many of them, face the problem of trying to heat their homes and pay the bills this year. Huge numbers will will not be able to deal with the extortionate rent hikes that the government are giving them no support for, and we will have a million, as we have people waiting on hospital waiting lists because the resources are not being put into creating a properly resourced national public health system.
Anyone else? No, thanks very much.
National Fibre Day is going to catch on.
What?
National Fibre Day.
National Fibre Day is good, yeah.
I read it from Twitter, like, where I got my good times.
I missed a big chunk of the start of that.
Huh?
Would you be able to?
thinking that one up?
I got it on Twitter.
And I'll write that in the column for
National Fibre Day.
Could you sum up some of the things that were said there? So we missed the chunk of the start.
Oh, sure. So we were talking about. I mean, the reality is this budget is going to present crumbs for ordinary people. A fiver here, a fiver there. All amounts that are less than the increase in the cost of living in reality. So really people's incomes are being cut, and they want to be lauded for it. Nothing, it seems, for renters. I mean, really something completely inadequate for young people in terms of public transport, when we should be moving to free, green and frequent public transport. So in reality this is a back to normal budget, a back to the capitalist normal of crisis in healthcare, crisis in housing, and doing nothing about the crisis in climate that is facing us. Instead, what we need are eco-socialist policies, the kind of policy set out in the People Before Profit alternative budget.
Well, all the signs from the government leaks on this budget is that it is going to be an absolutely pathetic, hopelessly inadequate budget that will do nothing to address the spiralling cost of living crisis that many working people are facing, that pensioners are facing, that students are facing, and that does nothing like the scale of investment we need to address the housing and homelessness crisis or the huge waiting list crisis in our hospitals. Instead, we're getting crumbs, a miserable fiver in social welfare and pensions, a tiny amount in fuel allowance against a backdrop where energy costs are rising between 500 and 800 and maybe more euro for many households and families over the last year, more likely coming in the next number of months. So people are actually going to lose a few crumbs, but in reality working class people are going to lose, and the problem is that this government do not want to make the very wealthy and the big corporations pay their fair share of tax. So there's simply not enough then around to give people a break on energy costs, to give our pensioners something, to give our students something, and to put the money we need into health and housing. It's typical, same old for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and it's why we need to get rid of them. But I suppose no surprise for most people out there.